I want to thank everyone who's taken time from their day. And with that in mind, we want to make sure this is as productive as possible. So this is a Credit Union Digital Town Hall. It's sponsored by Cousins as well as CU Broadcast, which Mr. Lawson is here. Mike and I will kind of be your hosts. The goal of this is to share information. So we've even cut down and changed it up as we've learned. This is actually the 7th town hall that we've done. And every one of them has had, over 40 people. So it's apparently working. I get good feedback, and we're looking for more feedback. There's a few of my staff on here who probably speak at some point. They're very fluid. Really, it's just a conversation about what's going on and what to do. So the format is we've tried to limit it to the number of credit unions, and we think we've done that. So if there's a couple of you here, maybe you can work together to speak. After an introduction, which is going to be even shorter, then we'll get you guys going to talking. If you let Melissa know, either in private chat or in the regular chat, that you want to speak, that would be good. Because of Zoom bombing, which apparently Lawson's been doing in his spare time.
Sorry.
That if you don't talk to us or we don't hear back from you, we're going to unfortunately dump you because we don't want to have any of that here. The main thing here is to really foster collaboration. So if someone's speaking from a credit union and you feel like you have input or have more questions, we encourage you to reach out in the chat and talk to them directly, get a connection, get an email, get on the phone with them, whatever needs to happen there. If a bunch of you want to get together, let us know. We'll facilitate something for that. If there's something deeper that you want to talk about, remember, we're trying to keep these down to 5 or 10 minutes with the time frame we have. That if there's something deeper you want to discuss, then that might be something for Mike to take on in the CU Broadcast format. And he will reach out to you on the chat and get a time to bring up there. These
just interviewed Helen Gibson this morning from.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, she was great.
Yeah, so we will definitely be publishing these. So the recording and what you see will all be out there. So keep that in mind as you're discussing. If there's something confidential, obviously don't bring it up here, but we hope that won't, and so far it hasn't impede you from being candid. That's really the most important thing here, is to share what's going on and share. But these are published on CU Broadcast and on the big website. With that in mind, if you go to the big website where you signed up for this, you'll see the previous recordings are being updated in the schedule. Just because Zoom could be a little daunting for people sometimes, we'll just go over this. So in order to get the chat pop out, which is really important, you need to go into your Zoom window, and then that little bar that's on the bottom where you see the microphone and the video. But by the way, if you're okay with turning on your video, we're not going to have slides up anymore. We'd love to see you. And we find that that's very valuable. So if you're okay with it, but we also understand many of you are working from home and maybe are uncomfortable being seen, that's not a problem as well. It's up to you. It's a little more compelling, we're finding, when people are willing to crank up the video. But there's a button down there that says chat. And what that's going to do is it's going to pop open the right-hand window. Now, that little toolbar won't be down there until you hover over it. So it sort of hides and comes back. Once you do that, you'll see at the top that generally you pop into an everyone chat. And then down at the bottom, there's a little drop down that will give you the ability to pop into other chats and talk directly to people privately or whatever you'd like to do. Hopefully people are reaching out to Melissa very quickly. So with that in mind, I'm going to jump right to it. And I'm going to read a note from Jonathan Silly from Hudson Valley in Poughkeepsie, New York. It kind of, starting to be one of the well, not starting to be, is the epicenter, not Poughkeepsie itself, but it's spreading across there. I also just spoke this morning to Cynthia Schroeder from Visions Credit Union, which is in a place called Elmira, also Binghamton. And she kind of gave me some notes. So he did say he had a few updates. He says, schools in New York are now closed until mid-April, and stay-at-home orders in place for the same amount of time for non-essential workers. New York State is taking a bit of a different approach than other states, where they have canceled school, issued stay-at-home orders through April or longer. This is adding more uncertainty among parents about what they're going to do, as the time they've been allowed to take off as a paid administrative leave is used up, and now they're burning PTO. We have started PTO donation programs internally to help staff that have run out of time and need more. It's very heartening to see many staff stepping up and helping their coworkers. We've added nearly another 100 remote workers in the past week since we spoke to them last, putting our total number of remote workers to 400. We have a fairly even split between those using traditional VPN solutions and the SecureLink solution, which is something that was mentioned in the last one. Our staff are becoming more impacted as the virus speeds throughout New York, and concern grows about who may be infected or not. I have now had 3 staff in my department get tested for COVID, thankfully all negative so far, but the threat is very real and here with us. Social distancing guidance still seems to be a challenge for some staff to abide by, requiring constant reminders to ensure this is happening both inside and outside the office. As shown by the arrival of the U.S. naval ship in the NYC harbor this week, where crowds appear to watch the arrival, it appears that many people are not following this guidance at all. Our lending area has now received over 3,000 deferment requests for loans. This number is growing rapidly each day. We are investing a significant amount of IT effort in helping automate these processes within the EPISIS to the greatest degree possible. So that's Jonathan's update. I thought that was pretty interesting. The deferments in particular, reminding the staff to social distance. I'm sure it's just habit, you know, to go stand outside somebody's cubicle or something like that. But we're now hearing that maybe masks may be something that need to be worn all the time. Maybe that's something Canadians should just go ahead and do now. Maybe they find a source and hand them out to the staff for the people that still have to work in the shop. From New York, when I was talking to Visions Credit Union, to Cynthia Schroeder, she was saying that the call center is overwhelmed and slammed. And we were talking about ways to flatten the call center curve, because that's part of the problem. Talking about maybe working together to work on some sort of appointment program to just start to schedule these, because they're overwhelmed. And when the people finally do get to them, they're not happy. So those are some of the things that I got this morning from just some casual conversations, plus an email from Jonathan, who was gracious enough to send this in and before the shop to give us an update. How about Gary? Gary, you want to catch us up on what's going on at Unitas? Thanks, man.
Okay. Yeah, it's my new burner phone. You know, you told me about those.
Yeah. You got to break them when you're done. Yep.
I got it from Saul Goodman. So we have 12 branches. Only 4 of them, the drive-throughs are open. They're spread out around the Portland metropolitan area. And those are still open. We're still serving members. We've hired security guards to basically manage the traffic and then let members know that it's a secure place, since we're giving out money usually. Our CEO has started a weekly Friday, what he's calling a social hour and a check-in through Teams. The first one was last week, and it was pretty helpful. We're doing the emergency loans. I asked before this call what our numbers are. I haven't received a response yet. If I get an update during this call, I'll let you know. What else? It's just basically the same from the calls before that.
Well, I would imagine that, have you had to pivot on anything? Like, for example, I know you guys were starting to make use of the call center, or pardon me, the branch employees. Also, have you made use of anything from this? Any shifts from these meetings that you've implemented that have done well? Or like, I know you were talking about adjusting your verbiage about the ATMs to make sure that people are wiping them down, or there was a couple things, the night drop, and you were looking into the direct deposit stoppage.
I've shared that information. We're mainly just trying to help as many people as we can. There have been days where there were backups in the drive-through, and that's kind of what led to hiring of the security guards. The lines have kind of calmed down. Oregon is on, the schools are canceled through April 28th. So basically this entire month. We'll see what happens is, it's kind of, everything's still changing kind of daily.
So from the school's perspective, is that doing the same thing to you that it was doing to Hudson Valley, which is the concern around, now staff having to take more time off to deal with childcare?
Yeah, all of our, none of our employees have been furloughed or laid off. Everybody is working. They're just possibly doing different jobs. People that are back office, everyone's working from home. The frontline people.
So
have
people
just
who work from home that
distributed-
have their kids there, you guys are okay with them continuing to work from home in that regard?
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, that's nice. Yeah, I could see that. Is your state on a mandatory lockdown yet? Or
The
stay-at-home
governor
orders?
just announced, earlier this week, just a couple days ago, the governor announced that. So people are just going out to get essentials. A lot of restaurants are closed down, but a lot are also providing drive-through or takeout orders. We're trying to frequent our favorite restaurants that we don't want to go out of business, obviously, as much as
Yeah.
possible to keep them in business. And it's
What
pretty stressful.
what about, so now that that's happened, have you given notes to your employees who must go into the office so that they have something in case they get stopped?
I've not heard that. I mentioned that in one of the updates, but I don't know that we have implemented that. There's still quite a bit of traffic on the roads when you drive around, actually. We've gone to the grocery store a few times.
Yeah, that's one of the things we're hearing. I think that was Jonathan's point as well, was the social distancing and people sort of still kind of feeling like, oh, it's early for us, we'll go out. But so one of the things that I was discussing with Cynthia and Doug earlier, especially Cynthia, is this virus the death rate tends to lean towards our elderly members, and so they've started a group, and we were talking about helping with that, is reaching out to, there's a lot of transition to wealth that's going to start happening, and getting ahead of that, and also just being sensitive and providing condolences in this time of need for families and whatnot, is something that is something I was going to throw into this discussion. They've got people, working the obits, they can't have funerals. And so a lot of it is donating on behalf of that member, but also talking about finding beneficiaries and hopefully keeping a relationship with that family. That's a concern that's starting to arise in the New York credit unions. And I imagine as it, apparently, according to the presidential debriefs, as it makes its way across the country, it's going to be a problem for everyone. Have you guys talked about that at all?
No, but I personally have a friend whose mother passed away last week.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And she had commented that the mortuary, they had to pick up the ashes. They couldn't go inside. They just basically told them that we'll bring them out to your car. And that's just adding some additional stress. It's people aren't able to mourn because they can't be together.
Yeah. Well, and that's a big issue. So, that's something that we're looking at from the perspective of, we're looking at the perspective of dealing with how to sensitively reach out to those. And it's a big time, and if that person has beneficiaries, that money may be very important. And so something to consider that Doug and I were talking about. So that's another one out there that we've been putting together with a couple Gradians. So, and I know you're into data, so finding those deceased members, I think there's lists that come out from the county, and there's a way to sort of work with that.
I'm sure our operations department's working on it, but I'll touch base with them on that. That's a good idea.
Yeah, Doug, you
We
were,
are still working.
go ahead,
We're still
Gary,
working
sorry.
on that we're still working on that direct deposit report. We've got the first iteration of it done. Now that we're in April, we're going to run it again to capture people that had stoppages in March, from February to March. And marketing is working on the content of the communication to the member and how we're going to communicate to those members. So that's still in the works. Once I get another update, I'll let you know.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that's super important. Doug, you were mentioning to me some information about that transition of wealth that you read about just recently.
Yeah, it was, I unfortunately, with all the information going across the phones and the TVs and everything like that, it was national, but they said, it's the beginning of the transfer of wealth, if you will, because they said, between the baby boomers and the next generation. Unfortunately, I can't find it because there's been so many headlines.
Yeah, we'll definitely try to dig that out, but I mean, it's a pretty obvious sort of statement. I mean, it's going to happen no matter what. So I have a question out there. He was wondering, this is Dave Kraus, he was wondering if any CUs have asked for billing relief from their core providers, Jack Henry or Fiserv. So if you're looking into that, certainly in the everyone, if you could post out there. I know nothing of that. Certainly that would be between you and your provider, but it's a good question. So I think, thank you so much, Gary, for that update. I think Paul was going to go next. If we can get Paul to unmute.
Cool. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. And tell us who you are and who you're with, just because maybe everybody doesn't know you.
Okay. It's Paul Level. I'm with Nucinda Credit Union out of New Mexico.
Hey, Paul.
Hello. And, it feels like we've hit a glide path recently, like in the last 3 days. We were Decision Central 2 weeks ago with 8:30 nights, getting everything transitioned. We've closed our lobbies, drive-through only. But what I've noticed is the fact that we're not in emergency mode anymore, because everything's been decided. We can get creative. We had a member feedback from a rural branch last Friday, and it's an area where there was no drive-through, and we had to close the lobbies. We're preventing all member-to-employee contact except for things like HELOC closures and safe box access. But in Socorro, there isn't another branch for like 50 miles. And there's things that they couldn't do with the ATM. So we actually realized we had enough spare thinking that we have a video teller machine in our lab, in kind of our test area. And we actually just got it live. So we thought of it Friday. And because our contractors weren't really doing much and our cash providers, et cetera, we literally are sending out the email while I'm on this call to let the Socorro members know that they now have a video teller stuck in the front of their branch. So they still can't go inside, but they can walk up to a video teller at the front of their branch. And I'm just stunned that our SVP of member experience was able to deploy that within about 2.5 working days. It was pretty awesome.
That is very awesome.
But it sounds like we're doing what everyone else is doing. We did create an emergency PTO plan, which basically is expected to have unlimited budget as necessary. There's employees have to demonstrate that it's either childcare or even if they're just afraid to go in the office. It's a pretty low bar, but there is a form. And we were going to use donation PTO for that, but we decided that we will just make it unlimited. And upon asking, they get it. And not a lot of people have taken it. We've got about 500 employees right now, 550, and I think less than 20 have gone on that program. So they've been able to make at least ongoing. Some are like 2 days in and 3 days off, 3 days, whatever they can work out with because we closed schools in New Mexico about 2 weeks ago. And so we're just, modeled out what it would cost us to do it, and we're just keeping everyone whole. CEO's prime directive to this is that every employee or no employee will be financially harmed as long as we can make sure that doesn't happen.
That's
But
fantastic.
did a lot of phone appointments too. So we redid our website, and now for the phone appointments through the website, they're all phone calls. And so a member can choose to have a call back from one of our platform people through appointment only, a phone only appointment, so that they know that they will get a call, and they actually can schedule which branch they want them to call. So they have a favorite platform person at a particular branch. They can call them back. We only closed 4 branches because they didn't have drive-throughs, and we then put all the excess employees on the call center, and we had about 25% more calls yesterday than we did pre-corona for the same day of the week, but we still answered 98% of the calls within 1 minute, because we've got so much staff now. And we split our call center. That was big, because if one person gets sick, we need to, we don't want to have to close both of them. So we split the collections department in half and the call center. Now we have about 20 reps that are at home on call centers. That was new tech for us that we deployed in the last 2 weeks.
What'd you use for that?
I don't know. I can learn that.
Not
and
just
get you
interested.
back. I'm
Now, who
the
was your
CMO, so I don't.
who was your ATM provider? The ITM provider.
That's NCR, I think.
Oh, very cool. Well,
And
congrats on
it's
getting
an
that
old
out
one.
so quickly.
Well, and this is an old one. We went with ITMs and PTMs about, I don't know, we started playing with it about several years ago, and this one's 7 years old or 6 years old. It's only got, I remember it's got 1.5 years of depreciation left on it. But so it's an older model, but we were able to move it, get it down 45 miles away, and installed, money loaded. It's working as I speak for about the last hour down at there, and that's pretty slick. I have to say I was impressed. I didn't do it, but it's pretty awesome to see that done.
That is very awesome. And I agree. I think now's the time that if there's a glide path, particularly for those who are kind of waiting to be impacted, if you will, we're going to see. I mean, it's a pretty obvious spread if you look at site that I generally monitor. I'm pretty sure lots of people monitor it, but for the numbers, in my mind, I'm just sharing. I should be sharing a screen real fast. I was going to share where the site is, but when I look at these, numbers, as in particular in the USA, and this is just horrible. We're starting to get to 1 million here, but when I look at the USA numbers here, the path is kind of both. It seems like it's driving in from the east and the west. There's a lot of talk. I spoke to the CEO of PSCU, and certainly there's some concerns about, I guess, Florida becoming a hotspot as they begin to test, plus all the people that have, when I lived there were lots of New Yorkers. So, but as some of these states, and New Mexico is probably way down the list here. There you go. They haven't got their numbers in, but let's look at yesterday's numbers for New Mexico. And I'll put this link in there if you're interested, but yesterday's numbers where you added 34 cases and 1 more death, which is, even 1 is horrible, but clearly you're right. I think you're in this glide path, and you got to it's like a hurricane. You got to take this time, I think, to really think through everything and batten down the hatches and do what you can, I guess, until it gets here, according to Fauci and the rest. I hope that's not the case, but that's kind of what they're saying as we watch these numbers sort of exponentially move. And certainly Tom Shea from Aspire kind of drove that home in the very first meeting that he joined, and he's in New Jersey. And sure enough, that's bearing out here. We're seeing these things double. So, I don't know, if any of the Crayons are in contact with their states about these sorts of things or what that means, but as it grows into it, as I listen to Jonathan and look at probably what he's going through, you can imagine, with less impact because there's not as many people in some of these places, but you can imagine yourselves sort of in that same position. So yeah, I like that glide path comment and the idea that, like, hey, if you got time right now, now's the time to really think about all of these things. And that's what we're hoping is to learn the lessons of those who are learning them earlier and share them, across the board here. Thank you, Paul, for your time, and thanks for sharing that and find out. Before I move along here, I was going to, go over a couple things. I know a lot of people have just said they want to listen, but maybe you've changed your mind. Maybe you have a question. I'm happy to talk about a few more things. I've got some more stuff I'm happy to go over, but I wanted to make sure no one else wanted to share or ask a question. So if you want to, go ahead and throw it in the everyone chat. I'm watching that now. And if it is that no one's volunteering, I'll kind of move on to a couple of the other things I'm now seeing that I think are pertinent to us. One of which is the CARES Act. And for those of you that don't know the CARES Act is the SBA CARES Act for small businesses that is being rolled out. And obviously, as a small business myself, I'm following that very closely. Currently, the banks that are supporting it, they're about a week away from really getting that out the door and getting their minds around it and making it so you can apply. I know that a lot of credit unions have commercial, but I also know that that CARES Act is going to be part and parcel to how employees who've been furloughed get through this next month. So that is a big one that I think we need to keep an eye on. I'm not sure, if any of you have credit unions that are doing commercial lending, but even understanding what it is, what it means, what it could mean to small businesses, because those are the employers of your members, would be very important, because I believe you can work around what that is. If you know they're furloughed, you can provide programs and services that will, work with that. So again, another couple weeks out, but there's some interesting things around it. For example, it's a forgivable loan for employees as long as they, I haven't got a good answer on this, but the way it was defined is that as long as they don't exceed $33,000 a quarter, $33,333 a quarter, which is tantamount to under $100,000 for an employee. So I don't know if that means that the organization, the small business, can compensate the employee up to $100,000, but not beyond that, or if you just can't compensate an employee who makes over $100,000. And I've seen it written both ways, so I'm still waiting on some of that information, but that would be interesting data for you to look at, is of your employees, who's working for, small to medium-sized businesses. Someone like Chris, probably Hempel, who's from Suncoast and has said he's going to speak on Friday. That's the kind of thing people can suss out in their data. And then what do they make? What's their salary based on maybe their credit score, to find out, okay, what does this really mean as far as impact on the economy? Because I think the economy is the second wave behind this. It's the economy grenade. You pull the pin, count 3, and then it eventually goes off. This will be right behind it as people worry, think about those things. I think the other thing is, as the virus, and this is, I'm reading between the lines on Jonathan Silly's email, as the virus sweeps into town, people are going to be less and less concerned about you, and more concerned about their family members, more and more concerned about, those sorts of things. And the last thing on their mind is going to be calling credit unions or worrying about their loans, those sorts of things. As a matter of fact, I believe one of the things New York is trying to do is to force landowners not to collect rent or collect mortgages or rent or something. I don't know how on earth they'll do that, but there are things like that going into place as well. One of the things I was thinking of around the CARES Act and around the community-based stuff is there a COVID response page maybe on credit union site that kind of refers to some of these programs that you either know are going on locally or going on nationally, that you could encourage hey, if your boss, if your business that you work at doesn't know about this, certainly, they should reach out and, let them know and try to start putting some of those things in place, including Gary's mentioning, donate to food banks, providers, how you can help, check on elderly members, those sorts of things that some of us can do as part of the organization. Doug, I was going to call on you, but actually before I do that, I see Jim Yates is on, and I'd love to, I don't know, Jim, if you're willing to talk a few minutes, I think it would be interesting to hear from you with where you are and kind of what's going on out there and being sort of a mid-sized organization. Would you mind speaking, Jim? Hate to call you out, but.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay. Thank you. And we are, for those of you that don't know me, our credit union's about 60 million. We're in Cheyenne, Wyoming. We have 18 employees, 3 are part-time, and we're doing okay. Just this week, we instituted a rule where there can't be more than 4 people in the credit union at a time. We're only having 1 person work the drive-through. So we're trying to practice what we're preaching, and we were able to fairly quickly get more people so they could work remotely. They're answering the phones, and of course, phone calls are more of what we're doing now. So that's kind of where we are now. I think most credit unions in this area, at least, are doing what they can. We're still doing loans, which is good, and working with some of the technology to do that.
So one question on that, like I was watching my neighbor across the street, and he sold his house, and right in the middle of the lockdown and everything, and then the new neighbors moved in. Do we feel like there was like a pile of, like, in terms of home loans, do we think, okay, there was a pile in the pipeline. Once those are cleared out, there won't be any more for a while? Is that what people are anticipating, you think?
I guess it depends on how long it lasts. But I just talked to a member who's a real estate agent, and she had shown 4 houses in the last week, which you wouldn't expect they would be showing any.
Right, yeah, I would think, how do you show a house? I guess you go in, then I'll go in, I don't know.
Right, and that's what she's been doing. She's been unlocking the door and just letting them go in. Fortunately, none of the houses have anybody living in them right now. But so I think it'll depend on the mental attitude of and what the economic impact is where you are. Our membership is a little bit more insulated because it's primarily school districts, community college, state employees. So those people aren't going to lose a paycheck. What we're concerned about are the people that are in hospitality and some of the smaller retailers.
Right.
So I think Cheyenne might do better than some communities because we are so white collar, so dependent on, government, state spending.
So there is a little bit of thinking, and this is happening in Colorado Springs, to you having a large base like F.E. Warren. So a lot of our COVID cases here in Colorado Springs are coming from Fort Carson as military is recalled from various areas of the world. And so just something to consider if you're a credit union that either serves a base or is in areas where there are large bases. There seems to be some evidence to, to that to some extent, and then into the community.
And Warren is their personnel don't get deployed a lot because of what they do, unlike Carson, where it is, troops going out and fighting. Most of Warren are missile maintenance and that type of thing. So they don't
guys who live underground out in the middle of the desert.
Exactly. And they don't go overseas a lot.
Right. They're also already socially distanced in a way.
Right. Yeah, and exactly. And they spend, a week with 4 other guys, and that's about it.
Yeah.
But we have had teachers that came back from overseas, and they have been a couple of the cases locally.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing. It's interesting to hear what a smaller credit union, 18 people, is doing and how it's impacting. And so I thank you for joining, and hope you'll continue to have success. And Wyoming is one of those areas that they talk about where maybe they can move things around or do something different. I don't pretend to know enough about that, but I feel like you have to kind of be prepared for both options, right? You have to be prepared for what happens if you got to stay shut for a long time, but if it suddenly reopens, what's that surge look like as well? And it's hard to sort of feed both of those masters. So it sounds like you're riding that line good. And congratulations on deploying the remote working stuff so quickly. I know that's been a scramble for a lot of folks, so good to hear.
Great.
Let's see, anybody else want to speak real quick? And I forced poor Jim to speak. I'm not going to do that to anyone else, but I thought I'd turn it over to Doug, and then I thought, Mike, I'd like to hear a little bit about who you're kind of hearing from out there. So go ahead, Doug.
Thanks, John. I want to back up to what you talked about on the SBA loans, the CARES Act, and I know we got some emails from our CPA firm, Clifton Larson Allen, and then one of our vice presidents from our compliance team was on a call today regarding that as well, and I just sent you the email on that, John, but they're really suggesting to people that may need it, not knowing when this is truly over, to go ahead and apply for the loan and go through the CARE Act. And you may never need it, but apparently it opens up April 3rd, and they expect a lot of people. So they're like, get there early and get in your application to get in queue. So that, I would say, that would be a good communication tool for credit unions to reach out to your members in general. I mean, because you've got plumbers and other people out there. You don't know all the different types of businesses that your members touch, but it might be a communication tool that you want to get out. And then also, just circling back, John, we might want to, you and I have been talking the idea of just, where are things at from an outbound calling, and we've been doing some research as to, what some of the other providers, Co-op, PSCU, and it sounds like their volumes, just like the credit unions that Paul, you had talked about, and some of the others, your volumes are way up. Their volumes are extremely high as well, trying to serve their existing credit union client base. So I think it sounds like from our initial contacts that everybody's stretched kind of thin in some of those areas. Wouldn't you agree, John?
Yeah, that's what I was hearing, and I think you're dead on. It's what Doug and I have been discussing is the software for call centers for homes is readily available, particularly outbound dialers. And so one of the things that I believe we could get ahead on is that the path forward, we believe, is getting ahead of flagging the curve by scheduling appointments. And actually that was borne out a little bit by Paul from Nucinda, who talked about that, they put an appointment scheduler. If everybody's, it's like I used to tell the kids when I was a school teacher is, they wondered why everybody just didn't have lunch at once and why we had these little shifts, and it's, we would overwhelm the lunch ladies. Well, it's a similar thing here. If we can get people to schedule and we know what they're going to talk about, then we probably have a better ability to deal with those surges. So one of the things we were talking about was designing an outbound call center that could take files from credit unions without really much PII, and doing it from an ANI that would feel like it was secure, be able to make a call and schedule an appointment, maybe even a Zoom appointment with someone on behalf of the credit union, and trying to get ahead of this curve for people who have stopped their direct deposit. And so with that in mind, Doug tasked us, us being Nate and our Tim Tibbles, with designing a survey around that we're going to put out to hopefully find out if that's of interest. You know, one of the things that we feel like is if we could get that sort of curve flattened in the call center, and also make sure that people aren't answering things that don't need to be, you know, aren't related to having to have PII and personal information and those sorts of things, then we could start to, you know, build some overflow. But more importantly, the scheduling, I think, is important because you can schedule around your call flow, you can schedule into your call centers and use those resources. So it's and the more we dig in, as Doug and I were sort of reaching out, we're finding everybody's in the same boat. They're all overwhelmed. And so if it is that, you know, again, you could flatten that curve, it's a similar thing. I think it would behoove us to do so. So I'm still working with Doug on that, and we're still talking about it. And if it's something you're interested in, absolutely reach out to us. We're trying to just think about things that could help people, really more than anything else, reaching out to some of the bigger folks out there who run call centers to see what their thoughts are. That's a great point.
The other thing, kind of an extension of John's comment about, you know, asking or surveying about outbound calling, we're going to be, as part of that same survey, just trying to take an extension. So John and his team did a great job initially, you know, what are you doing with your members, and they're doing that survey. And so we're kind of taking it to the next level, not so much of are you distancing and are you doing skip a pay and all those types of things, kind of more at the higher financial level. Are you going to be eliminating projects? You know, what do you think it's going to do to your bottom line, kind of strategically? What is the credit looking like over the next couple quarters? So we're going to be sending that out, and again, sharing it with people so you can see not just yourself, but you know, how do you compare to others? Is everybody in the same boat? Does anybody have any different ideas? So that's going to be coming as well. And then one homework assignment, John, that I'll give myself is one of our Credians about, a year, 2 years ago, they reached out. I don't know how they did it, but they reached out to Great Clips, you know, the haircut place.
Yeah.
And they got in touch with the developer on their website that does scheduling, and that they actually use that software for scheduling for MSRs within the branch, or in the branches, I should say. So maybe that's something I can do some homework and we could put out there as more and more people are trying to now schedule. Maybe it would be a tool that people could look into.
Yeah, absolutely. We were just talking about that this morning. We were looking at several outbound softwares, schedulers, we were just brainstorming all the ins and outs of that. I think that's a big one. And you know, Paul said he was going to check on it from Lucinda. It'd be great to know what they're using. But yeah, I couldn't agree more that, you know, these sorts of times require kind of innovative responses. And that's what this is all about, is sharing those innovative responses and what they look like. I also think we're very fortunate to have people from New York sharing with us what's going on, you know, in the sense of how that is unfolding over there, because those are the learnings for those that are in the path of this. For everyone else, I think, to various degrees. So yeah, I couldn't agree more, Doug. And I'm looking forward to that survey. I know Tim's on. The old survey is still out there for folks to go look at it. It's on the page, the CU Digital Town Hall page. As we kind of come to a close, because not everyone wants to speak, and I'm okay with that. If you're here to just listen, that's what we're fine with that. I wanted to kind of get a feel from Mike. Mike, I know you're, you know, obviously you're a journalist, and this is a topic for you. What have you heard? You know, give us the summation of the CU broadcast, kind of which ones should people go watch, and what's been the findings as you continually interview people on this?
Oh, I interviewed, you know, Dr. Joseph Breeden from Deep Future Analytics. I think he was
Yes,
at,
you know, Dr. Breeden.
oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
I've had him on my podcast before. He's brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of people that you need to listen to, I can't wait to produce and post this interview that I did with him this morning. It was It was a long one. It's about a 20-minute interview, but it dealt with coronavirus recession scenarios that he's modeling at his company, Deep Future Analytics. And it is all based on, well, here's one that's an okay scenario, here's a mild scenario, and here's a severe scenario, all economically driven, of course. And just the conversation we had just around that was mind-blowing. And then he kind of gave a global perspective, because he obviously knows people all around the world, especially in China, in Southeast Asia, China and Taiwan and stuff. And he was telling me what's going on there. And he's got friends that said when China did a lockdown, it was like house arrest. It isn't like you can just go to the grocery store or you can run and go get gas. You have to get actual permission to leave your house. There are guards at gates, there are police officers at intersections and stuff. So he's telling me all about that. And then he said that's how they were able to, I guess, contain it so quickly, because it was basically a house arrest, and how that would be really difficult to do here in the US. Another story that he told me in Taiwan, they were actually checking people on airplanes before they got off. Doctors and nurses and health officials would go onto the plane and test people on the planes before they got off. And he said that's how Taiwan was able to contain it so fast. And then he said on the other end of the scale is a country called Belarus, and they're doing business as usual. So the leader there is like, it's another kind of mind-blowing thing, but they're doing other ways to check people and to kind of contain it as well. But he said Belarus has to keep people working, or else the country is just going to fold. So they don't have any aid like we do, or other European countries or Southeast Asian countries that would have an a fallback. So he said that was really, really interesting, but just a fascinating interview. And Joseph's, his delivery is so calculated and so mild, but the way he talks about this is you're just like spellbound. So
he's an excellent speaker, and certainly, and it's interesting, that concept, because okay, if Belarus chooses to sort of ignore it and stay open, that's a problem for the rest of the world. Right now, all Belarus people aren't allowed anywhere, because the concept of, a lot of the folks are sort of identifying that as an approach, or looking into this herd immunity thing, but herd immunity doesn't work, as far as I know, without a vaccine. And so I don't know enough about it, but
he explained it much better than I did. I'm just kind of paraphrasing him. So when you watch it, it's in the second half or toward the end of the interview, and it's just fascinating how you have somebody on this side of the spectrum, and then you have another country on this side of the spectrum, and seeing what's working, what's not working, and if it is going to work. We still don't know. But just the scenarios that he laid out, just the okay, the mild, and the severe, and he said there might be a second wave coming in the fall. So he said that's what, I think it was Hong Kong he was talking about. They locked down everything right away, and then they loosened things back up, and all of a sudden the second wave hit. And so now they're locked down again. Yeah. So that's something that we have to look out for as well. So just so many, I'm getting goosebumps talking about it, because it was such a good interview.
I can't wait to watch that.
Came out that really kind of surprised me was part of the CARES Act was the payroll protection program.
Yep.
There seems to be a debate out there right now whether credit unions can participate in this, not providing these loans, but getting these loans, because the credit unions that are considered small businesses, would they be eligible for this in case they need to meet payroll, or they need to pay expenses or something like that? As this goes on, a lot of us are going to need some money, and credit unions included possibly. So there's a debate out there that just kind of came to my attention yesterday. And so that
sounds like more homework for Doug.
Possibly.
Yeah, exactly.
So Doug, maybe I saw the link you sent me, maybe ask Clifton, Larson, Booz, and Allen, or whatever their name is, maybe ask them that. I'd love to hear their professional opinion on that.
Sure.
So that's a very good point, because, someone like Jim, who's a smaller shop, that, not that he would need that, but if the worst were to happen, that may be something that, you need to know that you've got to get involved in, because The other thing is like the disaster relief loans that were immediately put out 3 weeks ago, it's just been dead silence. I've talked to a bunch of people who have applied for those and there's nothing there. So yeah, trying to put all that together now, and it's a lot of work. But it's interesting that there's a debate about that. Maybe Doug could invite Clifton, Marston, and Allen on to see a broadcast or something to
Yeah,
talk
that'd
about.
be great. Yeah, I'm hoping to talk to, I think, NAFQ. I think they might be able to talk about it next week. So I'm hoping to get somebody on that to talk to about that. And and one more I just want to share real quick. I spoke with Eric Hepkins. He's the CEO at Cornerstone Community Federal Credit Union in Buffalo, New York. And he was telling me how they have split their employees up there. They split them up into Team A and Team B. And Team A works 1 week, Team B works 1 week, and they kind of staggered their hours so they reduce the exposure if somebody is infected.
Well, they're in two separate sides of the building, and they're cleaning one side while the other side works, right?
Right. Or
That's
they go.
actually the Department of Defense is doing that out here in Colorado Springs. That's actually what they're doing. Believe it or not. Think about this. I live right by NORAD. Imagine an underground mountain germ fest.
Yeah.
Right. So that kind of stuff is going on because they've got those special situations that then when I was talking to it was Team Gold and Team Blue Eye. And then they're bringing in that, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, we had Robert from Wistera on talking about electrostatic cleaning. So while one group works on one side, the other works, and it's 7 days and 7 days.
Yeah, he talked about that as well. Yeah. So just, I mean, as you well know, I mean, we've just heard so many really cool stories and great ideas and stuff out there. So, and there's lots more to come because I got former NCUA chairman Rick Metzger is going to be on next week.
I heard you were actually interviewing the virus.
Well, if it could talk, I would sure try. Definitely. So, yeah, it's just crazy right now. So, but
It is absolutely nuts. And I thank you for sharing that and all the information. So we're getting towards the end here. Paul raised his hand. He actually has a couple of the answers to the questions that we asked. So I wanted to throw it back over to Paul from Nucinda.
Thank you there, John. The answer I get from my CIO is that for the call center at home technology setup, is we're on a Cisco phone system and we're using Cisco Jabber as a soft phone. The soft phone is running on VMware Horizon virtual desktops. And so agents are using their own personal computers with gaming headsets. And I remember the CIO saying he went out to Target and bought like a crap load of gamer headsets just for this. But they're using their own computers with gaming headsets plugged into them to access the virtual desktops.
That's awesome. I think that's good to know because those gaming headsets aren't that hard to come by. So maybe that's something people need to go out and grab, you know. Definitely using their own home computers. That's something we've been talking with OGO, ongoing operations, about. We've been doing some what we call red team, blue team, where I'm the hacker and OGO is the good guys trying to keep me out. And like, for example, here's one that I scared the crap out of them with. So let's say that your home employee is all good. They're working on their computer, but they got one of those IP cameras that watches the living room. So now I'm in the IP camera watching your screen and recording all the member data that goes by. I mean, it's all kinds of crazy stuff that I've figured out around. So I'm going to be posting some of that soon. But yeah, and that was just the beginning of what I did. So I'll be putting a video together out there. We need to really be concerned about, I'm good with everybody moving forward, get it out there quick, but man, there's a lot of risk on the remote workers. I just want to make sure everybody's aware of it. I was talking to Stickley as well. We're getting close to done here. One of the things that as I just talked about, I'm very concerned about is as we move to more remote communication is privacy and basically understanding who we're talking to. And I see that we are blessed with, from CEO Ledger, one of my good friends and someone I've known a long time, Dante, out of Tampa as well. Dante, want to talk a little bit about what's going on? I know there were lots of cranes that implemented the member ID piece, and maybe give us a quick update because that might be something that's useful as well.
Sure, John. Thanks very much, and thanks for the invitation to these calls. This is really helpful. It's the first one I've been on, but really helpful, and a lot of what I'm hearing has mirrored some of the things we've heard certainly in terms of consumers or members moving to digital environments and contact center calling and such as opposed to face-to-face. On the CU Ledger front, we've had a couple of new developments and recent developments. One, and most of you on the call probably know, we did change the name of our solution from MyCUID to MemberPass. We did that in February. And just today, we've announced a way for credit unions to establish their digital identity, if you will, without having to, certainly if they're not ready to move into a full-fledged project to implement MemberPass for their members. And that is through something we're calling the MemberPass Trust Registry. So, credit unions are able to go out through our MemberPass website, and there's an attached registry website now where you could become established on the registry so that other credit unions know which credit unions are involved in providing digital identity to members. And digital identity to members, of course, is ultimately what will alleviate the need for user IDs and passwords and knowledge-based questions and so on. So that was just announced. It's actually just being announced today, and we're reaching out to credit unions about that. It's actually nothing new in terms of it's always been the initial step for a credit union to implement MemberPass, because this piece, the registry piece, is the work that CU Ledger has to do to issue the identifiers, the public identifiers for credit union, and actually situate those identifiers on the distributed ledger. So it's simply moving that piece out of the formal implementation and advancing it to say, I'm a credit union definitely interested in moving to create digital trust with my members and with other credit unions. Let's reserve my place on that distributed ledger and assign my identifier now. So the ultimate implementation is much quicker and accelerated. So look for more information on that from us, certainly, but that was the initial piece that we wanted to get that out in front early. And the circumstances that we find ourselves in kind of amplify the desire for credit unions to really move more toward that digital environment and more quickly than not. We believe that, and you may have talked about this in other calls, but we believe that because of the length of time that we're enduring what's happening with COVID-19, that's a fair amount of time to begin to change and behavior and form habits. And so folks that were used to walking into branches may very well find themselves now trying new technologies and perhaps liking the new technology or finding where it adds convenience and time saving and so on. And so that creating that digital trust is becoming more important now more than ever, given the environment we're in.
Well, first of all, catastrophe is the #1 catalyst for cultural change. It always has been. The other follow-up I would have to that is just reducing the time it takes to determine who a person is, especially right now with the call centers overflowing. It takes a couple minutes to go back and forth. If you could turn that into 10, 15, 20 seconds, that's a big deal. And I think if this is extended, absolutely. So it's memberpass.org, I think, is it? No, .com, memberpass.com.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And so if you haven't been there, I'll throw it out in the everyone. You're welcome to do that too. But we think that I do agree. Getting signed up for this registry is the first thing, because what that does is it allows you to sort of claim your members and your employees and begins that digital solution. So thank you for sharing that, Dante. We'll probably do more on that. I was talking to John about talking about that a bit more in the stuff. But I appreciate you joining in.
Yep.
Ed just said that all of Florida is now locked down at this moment. So I hope you're enjoying where you are. Welcome to the club. And I think you're in Hillsborough anyway, so you were already locked down, but it's now official statewide lockdown. So, and I think we're just going to see this float across the country if it hasn't already. I'm going to give the last word to Tim to tell us a little bit about the survey he's going to send out, and then we'll close this out. We'll get the recording out. We can't thank you all enough for joining. Go ahead, Tim.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. We're going to be sending out a survey to ask a lot higher level questions now about your organization and looking at it from a strategic perspective and the impacts that this is having on you guys from a revenue perspective, from an expense perspective, and really diving into things that can help us understand what long-term impacts are going to look like as far as the industry, and what is going to happen from perspective of fraud, and what are you going to do about your digital channels now, and what's been the impact on your contact centers and such. So it's going to be a lot shorter than the last survey, but we believe it'll really help the next time you guys come in to these sessions, you'll have a little bit better picture as to what's going on across the country.
For those of you that don't know Tim, he is our data scientist here at Big, wealth of information, and he's certainly been putting double duty in to try to help out with this. So thank you, Tim. We encourage everyone to fill those out. And with that, I am going to call it and let everyone go, unless there's someone who, your last moment here, but if someone has something else to add, anybody? I'm gonna say no. Well, thank you. We'll hold another one of these on Friday. Chris from Suncoast in Florida has shared with me he's gonna do an update on Friday, so I'm very excited to hear that. They're a huge credit union, and I know they've got lots of talent and lots of thought, so it'll be good to hear what they're thinking as we move through this. I also talked to Chuck Fagan from PSCU. I think he's going to join us this Friday and talk a little bit about what we're seeing from PSCU. So I'm trying to gather up some folks and add to this. So Doug, as always, thank you for sponsoring, and thank everyone for joining, and I hope you got something out this. It'll be published shortly.